Welcome, chess collectors and players. This is the June episode of the Chess Collector Hangout, the video podcast of the Chess Collective, where we delve into an interesting conversation with a fellow chess collector. I'm your host, Stefan. This month I had the opportunity and privilege of speaking with National Master Jon Crumiller. Jon might be called the Forrest Gump of chess. He's been playing chess for over 50 years, was Delaware state champion back in 1976. He got his master's title in 2001. He played a 2-on-2 non-consultation game with Garry Kasparov as his teammate. He actually had a draw with Magnus Carlsen in a New York City simultaneous exhibition in 2012. As a chess collector, he has had 2 exhibitions at the World Chess Hall of Fame in St. Louis. As an author, he wrote numerous articles on antique chess sets. He co-wrote the book Master Chess Works, Rare and Beautiful Chess Sets of the World. In 2020, he wrote a Chess Life cover story with Lev Albert on the fascinating topics of chess adjournments. He co-authored a book with Lev Albert on the 2016 Carlsen-Karyakin World Chess Match in Manhattan, which achieved the Chess Journalist of America Award. Jon is also a member of the FIDE Historical Committee and the U.S. Chess Recognition Committee. He premiered on the television segment TV show called Most Expensivest, hosted by American rapper 2 Chainz. And as always, if you want to get more information on the behind-the-scenes conversation I had with any of the chess collectors, please visit the website, thechesscollective.us. Also, if you like what you see and you want to support the channel, you could do so by subscribing. So thank you, everybody. So please welcome chess collector and national master, Jon Crumiller. I had watched your television premiere on the Most Expensivists, hosted by American rapper 2 Chainz, which was pretty entertaining. And thank you for joining me. After all this, I only have 1 chain, so not quite as impressive. So thank you so much. So why don't we get into your chess collection? So what first inspired you to start collecting chess sets?
It was back in 2002, basically 20 years ago, and I was just cruising through eBay and saw an antique Jakes set, and I almost didn't even know that antique sets existed. Mm-hmm. Jakes, of course, is considered to be the Rolls-Royce of chess sets and have for quite a while. So I put in a bid and won it, and the set came, and it was a beautiful set, 3.5 inch, which is not their largest size. Their largest is the 4.4 club size, and then later in the 19th century they started making the 4.0. But 3.5 is definitely a playable set, and it was really beautiful. So then I saw another one on eBay and bought it. Then I was cruising around and noticed that there were some antique Jakes sets for sale. And one in particular looked stunning. It is a club size 4.4, mm-hmm. and it was not cheap, but it was beautiful, the most beautiful knights I've ever seen. That was by a collector/dealer here in the U.S., and I bought it, and I thought, I'm all set. I bought, I'm now in Nirvana, chess Nirvana. I have such a beautiful set. And then just coincidentally, a week later, another set came up, club size. Oh, incidentally, that club size set was from the first year of manufacture, 1849. And so on eBay, another set came up, and it also was a club size from 1849. Those wow. And so I figured I had to buy it. It had, and I did. It had some damage. I had it restored, which is an interesting conversation in its own right. There are 2 schools of thought. One is that the damage is part of the history of the set. The other school of thought, which I belong to, is that a restoration of an antique set is honorable to the set itself. So, but both viewpoints are perfectly valid. And so then I had 2 club-size Jakes antique sets from the first year of manufacture. And to this day, there are only a handful that anybody has. So that was really a coincidence. I saw a fifth Jake set. You'll notice I'm saying Jake sets because I started out definitely on the playing set side as a player.
Right.
So buying the playing sets. Then I noticed there were other styles, patterns of antique sets. There's the French Jons set. There were Old English style. And some of these names, the French directories style, there's a German playing set style. So there were different playing sets. Oh, and the very popular, in fact, the second most used pattern ever, which is the so-called Islamic or Muslim pattern, which have no figural representations. And at first, one looks at those sets and says, okay, their beauty and mystique kind of grows on you over time.
What is the first most popular chess set?
The first most common is online icons.
Okay.
Because the online chessboards have, so many millions and millions more games. In fact, millions of games every day. So that has to be, with unquestionably, the number one chess set pattern used in history. But in terms of real physical sets, it has been the Islamic pattern. It's had a very wide geographical dispersion over a very long time. In fact, in the chess and artwork, one can see Islamic chess sets and pieces from over 1,000 years ago. So It has been that long. Anyway, so I noticed these other playing sets and started buying them because they were beautiful. I never considered myself to be a collector until my wife said, well, you now have sets in almost every room on the first floor. You've covered a room on the third floor, et cetera, et cetera. And so then that was several years later, and I had to admit to myself that yes, indeed, I was a collector. So having started out with the playing sets, then I noticed the ornamental sets. And the ornamental sets are stunningly beautiful. They are not for play, they are for display. So you display them in display cabinets, etc. You do not play with them. There are some sets that kind of overlap. They're beautiful sets, but they're also playing sets. Hastilo sets, for instance. And so then I started getting into the ornamental sets. And I was very interested, and still am, in their history and their provenance and a lot of things about them. I was drawn toward London, first of all, because I was going to auctions in London, Christie's, Bloomsbury, Bonham's, which had dedicated chess auctions.
Okay.
And I also started building a network and built a network over time of trusted fellow collectors, dealers, some of whom could be trusted, and just of the chess collecting world.
How do you go about authenticating, like the value and the age of and validity of a chess set when you're dealing with these collectors? Because you had emphasized the word trusted. Trust the word of your dealer.
That's an interesting and rich topic in its own right.
Yeah. And
by trusted, it did involve two factors, but the main factor was the price. So dealers some dealers charge fair prices, some charge whatever they can get. And I'm not saying that's unfair, but to collectors who have less experience and possibly, haven't built up the knowledge of antique chess sets, dealers could extract sums that were, twice the price, twice the value. That is why I built the catalog project, which I'm happy to go into, because I myself needed to understand the value of different types of chess sets, and that allowed me to do it. And as a kind of corollary, I simply made that available to the entire chess collecting world because other collectors needed it too. And also some dealers were appreciative. But anyway, it helped to levelize the kind of the market in terms of value. Now, in terms of authenticity, there are, and that is another slight aspect of dealers, because let's say they get a set and it has 31 pieces, not 32. And there are several excellent restorers who also have the capability of duplicating a piece very nicely. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that is not necessarily a bad thing. I've had a set where I needed one pawn was missing. Should I get that additional pawn? Yes, because I record in my database which pawn it is.
Okay.
With a little marking on the bottom or something like that. Mm-hmm. So any restoration I've made, or in the rare cases of piece replacement, they are marked. And I think that that's fair because the next owner of that set will acquire it and keep it with that knowledge. So I think that's fair. But there have been dealers who did not follow that type of rule and represented the set as fully original. So that's the other part of authentication. Authentication, like anything else, does depend on close inspection by an expert, mm-hmm. or multiple experts. In fact, the top collectors, and I eventually became one of them, are usually experts, not always, but usually experts, and trade opinions. So, what do you think of this set? I'm not 100% sure. Look at the knight head here, etc., and gain a consensus opinion of things. Most chess sets, it's very easy to identify its authenticity or not. The bigger question comes in either replacement pieces, which happen occasionally, or restoration to certain pieces. So a friend might send me a photo, or really someone from anywhere around the world. I get about 3 or 4 emails a week. It used to be about 2 every day when I was more active in collecting, from people whom I didn't know, at saying, "Here, I have a chess set. It's antique. Do you know anything about it? Can you tell me anything about it?" And of course, 7 or 8 times out of 10, in a very nice way, I would have to respond back and say, "This is a mass-produced set. It's worth $20. Here, on eBay, you can find identical sets, etc., etc." Occasionally, though, something antique would come through. Not occasionally, more than that, and rarely a world-class set would come through, and the person didn't even know its value or anything. And so I was happy to inform them
that's nice of you.
Approximate value. But yes, so experts inspecting sets makes a lot of difference. And different collectors or experts focus on different types of sets. For instance, one collector who has since passed away focused very heavily, and almost his entire collection was African sets.
Oh, okay.
African chess sets are stunningly beautiful. They are a special niche within the collecting world. Mm-hmm. But there are niches all through the collecting world. Other collectors really care only about Staunton design sets, Staunton pattern sets.
What would you say that your focus is on?
My focus is broader than is normal. Because not only do I collect antique chess sets, but I have collected antiquarian chess books and printings and magazines and autographs and things like that. Mm-hmm. So from the standpoint of the chess set collecting world, and I wrote an article on this. My collection is defined with really two words: chess and antique.
Okay.
So within those boundaries, I have had no limitations. I haven't had any areas that I haven't been interested in. And I'm saying that as a broad statement, but I could probably think of things like there are little porcelain artistic works, and there are a lot of them of two people playing chess, and they're only like 4 or 5 inches tall. Those I was never interested in. So there are a few specific types of things that I wasn't interested in. But when it comes to playing or ornamental sets,
yeah,
I sought out the best example I could find of every type, and then an article I wrote, Seek the Unique. I started seeking out one-of-a-kind antique chess sets as well.
Okay, nice. Would you say that is your number one feature that you look for when looking for a chess set is now one-of-a-kind chess sets, or is it more of something that catches your eye as the beauty of the piece, or are you interested in more of a particular like artist or something like that?
I've tried to acquire at least one or several of each type of antique set. And when I say type, for instance, there's a type of set that was made in Kolmogorje, which is above the Arctic Circle. And by made, this was in the 18th and 19th centuries, and not latter 19th century. It was more in the 18th, split over the 18th and 19th centuries. That type of set has specific features. The rooks are ships.
Wow.
The kings are always seated on a throne. The queens are viziers, so they are men. And vizier is, the Russian word fiers is kind of an antiquated word, but a word for the chess queen. And that is the same root word.
Interesting.
The bishops are elephants. So I'm giving an example of Kolmogorje set because I have several of them, but at first you get one and you're happy with it, and then you see a better example, or even a much better one of that type. And over time, if there were a better example of a type of set, I would typically go after it and buy it, or try to buy it, because of course one is oftentimes bidding against others, but usually buying it. So then when it comes to the types of sets, one can eventually acquire excellent examples of the different types, as well as one-of-a-kind sets that come up. And it's not as if one-of-a-kind sets never pop up. They actually, I have quite a few. In fact, I wrote an article just to highlight them, because they are beautiful, but they're antique. But their special characteristic is they are one of a kind. So yeah, that's what I seek out. However, when it comes to the book side, book and publication side, there are some very well-known and famous antiquarian chess books, and once one has a copy of those, if you see a much better copy, you might go after it, but it's going to be expensive. The books and the sets are not cheap. That's not saying that a collector has to spend a lot. Different people, as I mentioned, have different focuses, and collectors collect what they want. And so a collector can collect sets that are not on the highly expensive side and still have a beautiful collection. So that's not really a limitation. But on the book side as well, I sought out excellent examples of the top chess books in history. For instance, Roy Lopez, 1561. Of course, Roy Lopez is the name of a chess opening, but it is the name of a person. And he was a cleric who wrote one of the early chess books and it's a popular book. So I have a copy of that as well as other early chess books.
You had mentioned before bidding on chess sets and chess pieces. Now, do you have any interesting anecdotes where perhaps you got caught up in the bidding process or maybe got outbid by someone and you maybe were disappointed?
Sure. And I have several along the lines you're referring to. There is one set in particular that I have, and I'm glad I have it, but I clearly, definitely overpaid for it, and I knew it at the time. But it was more of a macho thing with two bidders, and the other bidder and I were friends. But at the time we were acquaintances, and so we both kept bidding kind of in macho style. I won that set. Other sets, and before an auction, well, you tend to pick out the sets that you're going to bid on. You know, you go to the auction house, you study the sets. Going there changes your opinion dramatically on sets from the pictures in the catalog. And I've gone and noticed sets that in the catalog didn't look impressive at all, and in person I was, floored by them. And the same is true with sets that I had picked out, not quite as good. But there are times when, and then you give yourself, you kind of set a limit or kind of an expectation. Within the auction, if the bidding goes above that, depending on how you're feeling or something, sometimes you say, okay, that's it. Other times, you just keep going and you win it for a little more, but you're happy. There have been occasions when I've been bidding for a set, I stopped, and later very much regretted stopping and very much wanted that set. One example is there was a really special set called from the Teesside Association in England, and it was a Jake Staunton club size set with board, and came in a box with silver chevrons on them, not actually silver, but silver colored chevrons going all the way back to 1888, the year that the Teesside Chess Association purchased it as an annual trophy.
That's amazing.
And I thought, this is a cool set. So I was bidding for it, and somebody else, it was down to two bidders. And eventually I said, okay, I'm it's great, but I'm just going to drop out. So I did. Well, the other bidder was a dealer with whom I'm very familiar. And he said, well, John, you were bidding against me for this set. Do you want it? And just for a small profit on my side. I said, okay, I'll take it. But the net effect is I was bidding against myself because I and the dealer, whom immediately thereafter sold me the set, were the only bidders at that point. Now, I actually got it for a price that does match its value, so that's good. That happened one other time to me, also with a what's called a Charlemagne set.
Okay.
The same thing happened, and it was with the same dealer.
Now, how many chess sets in total would you say that you own?
About 600.
Wow.
I keep them all in a database. I have them in two houses, and of course, all the books and magazines and publications and autographs are here in Princeton. And when I say 600, that does include travel sets and compendiums. So compendiums being, a box with many different types of games in it, and that was a popular thing, and I can see why. I also collect the antique chess tables, and I wrote an article on that called "Setting the Table," which I'll be glad to share with you, and other chess timers. Up until recently, I had a timer that was used in the 1927 Capablanca Alekhine World Championship match.
If you write an article on timers and tables, you can call it "It's Time to Set the Table."
Right.
So, all right. So I wanted to ask you, how do you display or keep all of the chess sets? Because I had previously interviewed Chess Praxis,
Yes.
And a lot of his chess sets he had in boxes and put away, and he had some of them on display. But 600 chess sets, that's a lot of chess sets to put on display. Do you take any care into maybe of the value of the pieces to preserve the pieces so they don't get destroyed? Do you keep them on display? Do you keep them put away in boxes? How do you? And you had mentioned that you use a database to keep track of the names of them. If I had 600 children, I don't know if I remember the names of all the children. That's a lot of names to remember.
Sure. Well, each set has its own personality. It is like a child. And not really. I don't want to stretch the analogy. I have 3 children and love them hugely. And obviously chess sets are different.
It's a very loose analogy, right?
But if somebody says, your green and white Central Provinces set. Okay, I know exactly which set they're referring to, because they've given the type and the attributes, etc. In my database, I keep a bunch of information about each set to the extent that I have it. Obviously, the size of the tallest piece, which is almost always but not always the king, right? So it's typically king size. People say, "What's the king size?" Meaning, how big is this set? However, for instance, there's a set from the Philippines that the knights are actually the tallest piece, which is an interesting style. But those sets are 20th century sets. I still have several of them, even though they're 20th century sets, just because it's a beautiful style. So each set not only has a name, but I also keep its location, because I need to identify. Let's say I need to find a set. Well, I have a lot of display cabinets. I have a room with built-in display cabinets throughout.
Right.
I have a room, of course, the living room, I have 2 standalone display cabinets. Down in the Texas house, I have 8 display cabinets, each, of course, with many shelves. Usually one can put multiple sets on a shelf with, acrylic stands behind the set in the front, etc. Quite a few of the top sets need their own shelf, and I have sets that need 2 shelves because they're big special, couple special sets. But they don't all fit. However, what I display is my finest sets or finest examples of each type. And there were some types that I loved, the Old English type, and that's why I focus so heavily on Georgian and Victorian London. For instance, I have many sets made by John and or Dorothy Calvert, Dorothy Calvert being his wife and then his widow, who still sold sets. So when one has quite a few examples of a certain type of set, for instance, I have over 60 Jakes Staunton sets. It doesn't make sense to display all of them. It makes sense to display what I consider to be the top ones, the special ones. The other ones, yes, they are stored in boxes. I have the boxes labeled, and that is part of the inventory, because if I ever want to find them, and sometimes somebody comes along and wants to buy something. For my first 15 years of collecting, out of literally only 20 so far, 21, and I've been a lot less active over the last several years, but I didn't sell anything. I just bought, kind of like a vacuum cleaner. So yes, I have sets that are sets that I still like very much. I enjoy, but I don't display them. I have them in boxes. The majority of, I'd say the vast majority of sets that I consider to be top sets, special sets, are on display.
Yeah. Well, being so organized, you're actually doing the responsible thing, because how many times have you come across a chess set and it's by someone who said, we have no idea what this is. It's been in the family for years. I don't know how much we're going to sell this for. And it's almost like a disservice to the chess set, where one day when you do pass on your chess sets, because you had mentioned before, you're just the keeper of these chess sets for the long history that they're going to have. Whoever attains them next, they're going to know exactly what they have, which is actually really good.
Yes, and you bring up a good point, which is, okay, we say we own these sets, and of course we do, but in another sense, we are stewards of these sets.
Yeah.
These sets have had quite a few owners throughout the centuries. For the playing sets, in one interview that I had at the World Chess Hall of Fame, I said, let's imagine that all the people who have played on this set were in this room. Well, it would be overflowing out into the street because it's been a playing set for hundreds of years. So we are stewards of history. And so, in my opinion, it's important to be good stewards of histories. So yes, and if somebody comes along and says, when they ask about a set, let's say it's an antique set, what I usually do is send the subset of the catalog project with that exact type of set so that they can see when it's sold in auction throughout the last 60 years, actually 70 years since the 50s. And oftentimes they can even find their set in the auctions from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. So that's a plus too, because then they have some history, some part of the history behind it.
So this is actually a good segue to, and I know in the past you had tried to catalog and maybe superimpose art pictures as a way to accurately narrow down what time period chess sets came from. But you also have been recently working on something similar, the London directories, where you're using addresses to basically delineate where chess pieces came from.
Sure, and actually the London directories was one of my first projects. It preceded the catalog project and preceded the chess and artwork project and the Staunton project, etc.
Okay.
Because I needed to know where and when these sets came from. There's a lot of misinformation in the chess collecting world. I'll give a for instance of that. There are books about antique chess sets. For instance, one written by Alexander Hammond in the, I think it was either the 30s or 40s. One written by Macett Beeson. And the problem is that these books are authoritative, but contain a reasonably high percentage of incorrect information. Sometimes sets were misidentified. Other times, especially someone like Alexander Hammond, just wanted to increase the value of his sets. And so he would make up stories about them or date them far before, etc. So what I needed to know, especially because I really love the playing sets from Georgian and Victorian era, and I needed to know who made chess sets where and when. Now, some chess sets are stamped or marked in some other way. Calvert sets are often stamped. Lund sets are often stamped. In fact, most people are familiar with William Lund. His father, Thomas Lund, made chess sets before William Lund did. Still in London, in a different part of London, 57 Cornhill, which William Lund eventually inherited. And some of those were stamped too, but others not. And then you can identify the unstamped ones by the whole series of characteristics that match. But I had a fellow collector, fairly respected collector, said Charles Hastelow never made chess sets. In fact, he was a dentist. And I thought, really? That's amazing. I need to find out if that's true or not. So what I did was, I had the idea that in a London directory, let's take a post office directory, a trade directory, commercial directories, street directories. Especially in the trade directories, it lists out all or many of the products that the people wanted to be known for and that they wanted people to buy. And occasionally, some of those were chess sets. So what I did was, and this took quite a while, is I found either it could be on auction, sometimes on eBay, sometimes, but usually on place like, if you know the services that sell antiquarian books and things like that. Most of those were from that type of era. So I acquired them for almost every year. And if you think about, you've seen and used those little flip books where you flip through and, it's kind of like a little movie because you're flipping through and it generates a picture that moves, etc. That is what these is what these directories are like. Because you can see year after year a person's in an address. Oh, wait, they just moved across town. Or when did they start advertising chess sets? When did they go out of business? And all those things.
Yeah.
So I collected all these London directories, went through them page by page. Incidentally, by collecting them, most of them are authentic. Actually, they're actual London directories from the 18th, but especially the 19th century, and I have them all on bookcases. And they're not, some of them are not in very good condition, others are in okay condition, which is fine. Some were microfiche, and I got a microfiche machine so that when I ordered it, I could get it, etc. A few were online. So I went through page by page and extracted out every entry I could find that was related to chess, manufacturers, retailers, etc., and built, in effect, the flip book for each and every one of them, namely captured all of the entries, photographed them all, clipped them out, put them all up on the web, and built a database, which I output as a spreadsheet, with manufacturers, retailers, and years, so that one could see who were contemporaries and when chess sets started, and also really interesting patterns. The best example of that was my favorite manufacturer, Jon and the Calverts on Fleet Street. They were at 189 Fleet Street. William Lund apprenticed and then took over 24 Fleet Street. Now, 24 Fleet Street does not sound like it's near 189 Fleet Street. Actually, it is directly across the street from 189 Fleet Street. So William Lund, who made chess sets after Calvert, and I have an ad for when the Calvert location, when Dorothy Calvert was retiring, which is in the late 1830s. She passed away in 1840. John Calvert died in January 1822.
Okay.
And that advertisement, it was a store that had a water closet, which was not common back then, but it had a double front window looking out. So we know for certainty that William Lund walked past and saw chess sets in the Calvert windows. And what's clear is that the Lund patterns developed from the Calvert patterns, and that when Dorothy Calvert sold her stock in 1835, according to an advertisement, even though she did sell some things past that, only for a few years because she passed away in 1840, I'm guessing, an educated guess, that Lund acquired much of that inventory because he sold a lot of chess sets. So the London Directory project was quite interesting. This is the London grid. Now, you might say, the writing is so small, I can't see anything.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
These fonts are actually 1 point, and here's why. Because the rows are in order. See how it generally goes out like this? Mm-hmm. These are years. And so it starts in the year 1765. See where I am in the formula bar?
Yeah.
That's where we're going to look at everything, by the way. But if I go over, I can go over to any year, right? 1795. It goes into the even up to 1952. But so you can see all the years involved. And for each year, we can go down and we see. So here's Wedgwood, very famous And now I can look at all the Wedgwood entries and see which year it is, and also see what context it's in within the other manufacturers. So let's look at Calvert for a minute. All I will do is find Calvert. There's Calvert.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to go over to where it starts. See up here, Calvert, Ivory Turner and Toyman, 189 Fleet Street. Right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I can see that that's in 1790. That's when he first started advertising in the London directories. So when did he open his business? Right around 1790.
Okay.
Here's John Calvert at 189 Fleet Street. And as I march through years, I can see what he advertised himself as, and I can see he actually stayed at 189 Fleet Street. It changed to Dorothy Calvert when? Okay, the first time she's listed is 1822. It switched from John to Dorothy. Now note in several, it stays at John even in 1823 and 1824, but then, 1825, but then it's purely, okay, here's an 1827. So she was still advertising as John. She was still advertising as John, even though he died in January 1822.
Wow.
And he was buried at the church, which was only a few doors down the road. Note that the last one is 1841. Because even though these say Calvert 1845, but there's nothing in the cell. It just ends in 1839. She passed away in 1840. Now let's get to Hastelo. Because remember, I was told Hastelo never made chess sets and was a dentist. Well, let me disprove that.
Okay.
Here's Charles Hastelo, Ivory Turner. He first shows up in 1838. Ivory Turner, he's on 4 Peter Street, but then he moves to Queen Street in Finsbury. These are all locations in London. Okay, here's Charles Hastelo, chessmen manufacturer. In fact, he had a chess set in the 1862 International Exhibition. Because given this information, you can research knowing where they were, when they lived, and the differences. I'm going to show you one other thing coming out of this.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite manufacturers, George Merrifield.
Okay.
Now, George Merrifield starts in 1818. Now, what you wouldn't know from this, but you find out in your research is, George Merrifield apprenticed under John Calvert in 1807.
Ah, okay.
Now that's fascinating for several reasons, because one of George Merrifield's pattern sets was actually what I call the early Calvert pattern. And it's very clear how he acquired the skills and knowledge of that very early pattern. Of course, the chess ivory manufacturers, the hardwood turners, hung out together. But here's George Merrifield, and you'll note his first address is 11 Great Turnstile. And he stays at 11 Great Turnstile. Here he is. And, oh wait, now he's at 13 Great Turnstile. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are times when streets get renumbered. And only research, which I've done, indicates that in this case, it wasn't renumbered. He actually moved. He moved down a couple places in Great Turnstile. So then he stayed in Great Turnstile. Incidentally, Great Turnstile is in Lincoln's Inn Fields, which is a place I visited. You can visit it.
Okay.
So he's at 13 Great Turnstile. Now I have a chess set with a label on it, and the label says, manufactured by George Merrifield, blah, 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 11 Great Turnstile. What's the date of that set? 11 Great Turnstile, 1818. When did he move? Around here somewhere. 1828. That set was made within a year of 1818 to 1828.
Yeah, so that's great because normally people might give a date and say circa early 1800s. Now you can help narrow it down that it was within a year or two. It's pretty cool.
Last thing on here, because I could go on and on, but
sure,
is that company names or retailer manufacturer names changed. Well, if a label or stamp has the name on it, oftentimes you can tell by the name where what the time period was. A great example being Jake's. Here's the Ivy and Jake's, 34 Leather Lane in 1794. That was John Jake's father, and John Jake's is the one most famous for chess sets.
Okay.
For bringing them out. But it changes to 65 Leather Lane. Soon it'll change to 102 Hatton Garden. Incidentally, that address, the address, one of their addresses, I think it was Leather Lane, burned to the ground, as a newspaper article said back at that time, because the Times of London, as well as the Illustrated London News and others, are still there, are still around, and some of them are even searchable.
When you have like a Jake set and you're looking for markings, where are you looking for on the set? Because a lot of times it just may say like Jake's on the king or something like that.
Okay, well, the stamps actually do provide information. For instance, on the very, very early Jake sets, it's stamped J. Jake's London. And then a year, about 1.5 years later, it switched to just Jake's London.
Okay.
So if you have the right stamp, it's a very early set. Also, let's say in the early 1890s, actually I think it was around 1890, they started stamping both kings, the white king and the black king, whereas before they only stamped the white king. Okay, so stamps do have meaning, but the first place you look is the knight head, the head of the knight. Why? Because that's the only carved part. And knight heads from certain periods, that is one of the main criteria used to estimate the date range of a Jake's set, is the knight head itself. That's the London Directory project. It's very helpful for finding out who made what, where, and when.
Wow, you are a true historian. Now, first of all, is this available for people to look at, or do you now you did all this work?
Sure.
Do you consider the future of this project like a wiki site where people would add to it or anything like that? Or like, I know there's a lot of work to do yourself.
Because I'm not as active anymore, I don't want to invest the time on major new initiatives unless something really dings my bell and I want to.
All right.
However, these are all downloadable from by various projects from chessreference.com, which is my site, chessreference.com/projects.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And they can download that spreadsheet, the catalog project, which shows 11,000 catalog entries from the 1950s up to 2016, which is when I stopped, which is when I became more or less inactive. And so I didn't need it anymore, so I stopped updating it because it's a lot of work to keep it. It was a lot of work to keep it up to date. So people can download that. They can download the Chess and Artwork project. Actually, the Chess and Artwork project is also a Google spreadsheet doc. And so, for instance, if I wanted to see, now I'm filtering, okay? I'm going to filter by Staunton. Okay, that's a Staunton set,
Okay.
right? Especially if you zoom in. Okay, so these artworks, which have the Staunton pattern. So this is that same artwork, but I'm zooming in on the set so that you can see that it's a Staunton pattern. There are actually a few minor deviations, but I considered that to be Staunton.
I was going to ask, is there an instance where your project with the chess in the artworks corroborates your research with the directories, where you're like, aha, this makes sense?
Sure, yes. For instance, sometimes paintings were dated, or you know the exact date. Other times, let's say the third one, this artist was active from 1833 to 1895. I have no idea when it was painted within that range. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that it was painted within that range, and there you can see it. So that's the idea behind the Chess and Artwork project. And this is actually just a Google Doc, but the spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet, can be downloaded from that same place, chessreference.com/projects.
Okay.
So that's the way that works. You can also, and this is pretty fascinating, you can see the geographic dispersion over time of chess set patterns by their appearance in artwork.
Oh, interesting.
And I give an example in one of my articles about a medieval type pattern that expands out from Italy to other countries by its appearance in artwork. Now, there are some caveats to that. First of all, there is a delay between when a pattern first pops up and starts becoming popular and when it shows up in artwork. I gave it 25 years. I figured that was about right. Plus, artists, I could paint today, and I'm a terrible painter, but let's say somebody could paint today a picture of an 18th century chess set. So that is that's one of the caveats involved, obviously, is that a chess set from an earlier period can be painted at any time. But it's an interesting way to explore when chess sets appear and when they don't appear.
So I had noticed in the pictures of the older chess sets, the pieces were white and red. Can you comment on why some of the antique sets were mainly red? Was that the style back then?
Oh, definitely. Of course, when it comes to wooden sets, it's usually a light wood and a dark wood, like boxwood and ebony, which is the vast majority of Jake's sets and other sets. When it comes to bone or ivory sets, the side of the, quote, black pieces, because chess is white pieces versus, quote, black pieces, were usually, but not always, stained red. Mm-hmm. Now, that red is cochineal red, which is made from an insect and was used and is still used as a food dye.
I know Skittles.
Nowadays, of course, there are... Yes, and I'm not saying Skittles use cochineal red, because there are other reds now that are used as food dyes. But it is still used as one of the red food dyes. Back then, though, red was the most common stain. And this is where the catalog project comes in handy, because I can subset all the sets that were stained red or green or black or blue or brown and figure out the percentages, roughly, it's not exact science, of how many sets, what percentage of sets, bone and ivory, were stained red versus green versus... Now, black, by the way, is a more recent stain. If I see a set that's stained black, it was either a 20th century set or restained in the early 20th century. Green, second most common, and not uncommon. I have quite a few sets that are green, but way more sets that are red. And what is the green stain? It is the same as the Statue of Liberty.
Copper.
Right. Yes. And oxidized copper. Mm-hmm. Let's take blue. Blue stain is the rarest stain I've ever come across.
Wow.
I've only seen this set, and last June in Lisbon, I was visiting a friend with just an outstanding collection, one of the absolute best.
Wow.
But it's extremely, extremely rare stain.
A couple of concluding questions. You are the strongest chess player and collector that I've ever had a chance to speak to, national master and prominent chess collector. So are there any grandmasters that are also chess collectors that you know of? And I just want to preface it by saying that, okay, you can consider yourself a chess collector if you own one or two chess sets. Technically, you're a chess collector.
I can think of two offhand, and one is a very familiar name, Anatoly Karpov. Has an extensive chess stamp collection. A friend of mine also has an extensive chess stamp collection. In fact, I just went into Manhattan with him a couple of weeks ago, and that's John Edwards, who just won the World Correspondence Chess Championship, and he has a stamp collection. There have been other people who collected. Hermann Steiner had a collection. He is a one-time, and he's a strong player. He was U.S. champion 1 year. The Piatigorskys had a collection. They in fact, I valued their collection for Christie's back in 2013. The Piatigorskis held several chess tournaments and very famous tournaments in the mid 60s because Fischer played in them. I think Spassky played in at least one of them, and other top GMs. Fischer didn't win that, but and then they stopped having them because Fischer was so hard to deal with, or at least one reason. Those are the only ones that come to mind off the top. I'm sure there are others though.
So I also wanted to ask you about the CCI, the Chess Collectors International. You had mentioned at one point in one of your emails or articles that you were a committee member and you answered a lot of questions for people about chess collecting through the CCI. Now, I had looked up the CCI and I had sent an email, but the email seems like it's no longer in effect, the one that was online. And also, I'm from Long Island, and I know at one point there was some kind of link between the CCI and the Long Island Chess Museum, and I don't think that's in effect anymore because when you look online, it says that it's no longer active. I just wanted to ask if people are interested in joining CCI, where can they find information about CCI?
Okay. CCI is still a vibrant organization. In fact, there's Chess Collectors International and CCI, the USA subset of that. And that's its own organization. But however, they have not had kind of web technicians at all. And so their internet presence has been very lackluster. It's more email addresses than anything else at this point. But there's a frequent magazine that's published for both CCI International and then separately CCI USA. So CCI has many members in the international side, not as many as it used to have on the US side, but for instance, there's an upcoming convention in St. Louis I think it's in July. Yeah, it's in July. I've already made my reservations for it. Incidentally, you mentioned the Long Island Chess Museum. Do you know about the Long Island Chess Museum? Some dear friends, and she has since passed away, Floyd and Bernice Saracen, longtime collectors. In fact, their collection grew so large that they had to convert their house into the Long Island Chess Museum. And that's what it is. Of course, I've been there on various occasions, and Floyd and Bernice have been here, and they are dear people. They're absolutely wonderful people. Of course, Floyd is still with us, and hopefully for a long time to come. But they were chess collectors. He is close to 70 years now.
Wow, impressive. So when I got into chess collection, it started out by asking questions, and on the Facebook presence, people were like, "Oh, you have this set and that set," and they were so helpful. And I almost view chess collecting as playing chess in the same arena where it doesn't matter. You can be a newcomer or you can be an amateur. You can be an expert. Everyone, I feel, whether it's at the professional level or the amateur level, is kind of like welcoming, where I don't see any other sport, and I wouldn't, whether you call chess a sport or not, you can't go into a tournament and all of a sudden practice playing tennis or have a tennis match for fun with Roger Federer, for example. But you can go into a chess tournament and get paired up with a really strong player, or start talking to a famous chess grandmaster, or start talking to someone in an elevator. And I think that chess playing and also chess collecting has this community where no one has these chips on their shoulders, where it's like, if you're not one of the best, don't talk to me. It almost feels like very welcoming atmosphere. So, and I noticed that with people like you that are prominent chess collectors, you're so willing to offer help to people. answer emails. And like a lot of these other people with these massive chess collections, it could be anybody off the street saying, what do I have here? And people just enjoy talking about their chess and chess sets in general, that they're willing to help them out. And I think that's wonderful. So like, what advice do you have of giving to someone that is just starting out in collecting chess pieces?
I'd say good advice is right along the lines that you're saying, which is to become acquainted with, become friends with fellow collectors. And fellow collectors it's more like it's a collegial atmosphere. It's not for the most part a competitive atmosphere. Of course, there is some competition, but that's a factor, but not a huge factor. As I mentioned, the bidding, the macho bidding for a certain set, etc. Even that was with a friend. So to build one's network, and the same is true in a business world or in other worlds, but to build one's network of trusted friends, advisors, researchers, is a great way to go, because then your knowledge increases, your appreciation for things increases, and even if you have a specific focus, it oftentimes broadens out based on what you discover that you didn't know before.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Very good.
I'd say that's a good way to do it.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we conclude the interview?
Either too much or no. So I'll pause us here. But just to say that chess collecting is a very rich topic, rich in the sense of deep and fascinating. It's a fascinating topic with so many tangents and attributes to it that it's quite a bit of fun. It's quite rewarding to see antique sets or to see other sets, because other people collect various types of sets, and it's fun too.
Well, Jon, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate you sharing your chess collection, offering your insights on chess collection.
And thanks for interviewing. And I think this is a great contribution to the chess collecting world.